Welcome everybody. I hope you can hear me well and you can of course see the screen. I wanted to welcome you to today's webinar, which is called Unlock App Marketing Success with Rewarded Ads. This is a joint webinar that we're doing here at Just together with Uplift. I'm very happy that we got two experts on the topic together. My name is Fabian. I'm going to be the host moderator of today's webinar. So let me just briefly explain how this works and who we have here today. So the webinar, we try to make it as interactive as possible, but we also have two parts of the presentation. So on the one hand, we have Chris Godrich, who's the VP EMEA and India at Uplift. And later today, we have Michael Paxman, who's the team lead for account management here at Adjust for Japan and APAC. Rewarded ads has been a hot topic lately. It has kind of seen a revival over the last couple of years. So it is a more and more popular format among advertisers and players alike. So if you think about gaming, players seem to be very favorable towards this advertising format because it pushes visibility of the app and obviously by that also helps you increase app installs. So we want to look at this format in a bit more detail because it's maybe not as known to you and you have maybe not experienced kind of the impact it can have on app installs. So we'll go a bit more into the history, so how it has evolved over the last coming years, which is something that Chris will talk about. And then Michael will go more deeply into how to measure the impact of rewarded ad campaigns in Adjust. But before we start, let's look at housekeeping for a moment. So for those familiar with the webinars that we've been doing here at Adjust, we do about one per month. It's the same format as always, so we'll roughly be speaking about 35 minutes. But we don't want this to be one-sided. We want this to be interactive, and we want you guys to actually walk away with some knowledge and some new good insights that you can use in your daily life at work. So I want to encourage you to ask questions at any time. You see on the right-hand side, there's this question panel that you can use. Just type in your question, I'll get that, and then I'll make sure that we answer this in the Q&A at the very end. So there's Chris's part, Michael's part, and at the end we'll have plenty of time for Q&A as well. Don't worry that you have to take notes. We'll send you the recording and also the slides via email once we're finished with the webinar. So yeah, just make sure to pay attention, ask questions, and obviously yeah, have fun along the way. Without further ado, that's all I had for housekeeping. I wanted to pass it on to Chris. Very happy to have Chris on the call today, who will walk you through the kind of evolution of rewarded ads, the impact they can have on your campaigns. And yeah, Chris, very happy to have you. Please take it from here.
Thank you, Fabian. Hi, thanks for tuning in today. I'll try to, okay, cool. Quick introduction. This is not a sales story about myself, so I'll just run through it. As mentioned, I look after our demand operations in EMEA and India here at Uplift. Been with the company for more than 3 years now. Have seen a lot in the last 3 years, and prior to that, spent a good amount of time with the likes of Google in Europe, and before that with Oracle. So there is more than just the advertising side that has brought me to Uplift and remain in the industry for as long as I have. What are we going to be looking at today? As Fabian already mentioned, we are going to talk a little bit about rewarded ads, the history, and kind of the comeback that we're seeing on rewarded at the moment before moving on to the measurement element that Adjust will cover. We've kind of decided or thought we'd split it into 3 different sections today. So first of all, the evolution of rewarded ads. Then we move on a little bit into the current state. What are rewarded ads, or what do rewarded ads look like in the year 2017? And a little bit of volume and scaling of doing rewarded ads in the first place. Before we kick off into the evolution, I kind of feel it's necessary or interesting to make sure that we all have the same understanding of rewarded ads and what we're talking about today. Rewarded ads, if we talk about having made a comeback or a revival, kind of is linked to a rebranding. So back in the day when things started off, they were called incentivized installs, today we're talking about rewarded ads. And if we talk about rewarded ads, it's something that is not new. It's not related to app marketing or anything like that. So if we mention Coke, Disney, Pampers, Starbucks, pretty much all the big hotel chains and airlines in this world, they all have some kind of reward program. So the idea of getting a reward for something is not new. If we relate it specifically to rewarded installs, it's rewarding or motivating somebody to do something as giving them a reward for doing something. So back in the day when we started, or when rewarded ads as such started off, people were incentivized or rewarded of installing an app. We still see this kind of app format or ad format around today. It has made a comeback, but that was just the pure original form of incentivized or rewarded. Today we see a lot of different variations of rewarded installs. It could be things like rewarded videos, which is based on a video view as opposed to an install. And there are different kinds of forms in the sense of having offer walls where the user could actually choose what kind of app they wanted to install in turn for a reward, which was linked to a lot of variety, or some kind of in-app rewards, as you can see on the right-hand side of the two phones, where by installing an app you would receive a certain amount of in-game currency or credits or coins or something similar. Now, what were the benefits of the original idea behind doing incentivized installs or rewarded ads? It was a high amount or a high volume of installs that were able to be generated in a very short period of time. Why? Because people did an action or installed your app, not for the sake of having your app on their device, but in order to receive something in return. Another benefit was, compared to a normal install, the prices of rewarded ads were much, much lower. Again, there weren't that many expectations, and all it was about was the install. As a result of all this, you were able to reach or maximize the reach that you would be able to send this message to without making any kind of discrimination. Because again, potentially an install was an install. It didn't really matter how relevant that install was to the actual app in itself. So if we go back to the early days, what kind of was the tipping point for incentivized installs at the time, and then led to the subsequent decline of the topic, is that since people were only looking at installs and nothing else, it was pretty much a dream playground for anybody related to fraud. All you had to do was simulate an install. Nobody questioned anything else. Payment was made on an install basis. That was it. There were very little or few expectations in terms of quality or even monitoring what happened after the original install. So the concept of lifetime value or monitoring post-install events that was slowly developing on the non-incentivized space had not really made it to incentivized app installs or rewarded ads at the time, or to incentivize traffic as such. Again, advertisers were getting used to the idea that CPI was a commodity. That was how you purchased app installs. But they were starting to look at things after an install. But the idea that you could actually look at qualitative components on incentivized traffic was something that wasn't really that well known or spread across advertisers. Moving on. So a lot of things changed in the mobile app industry over the last couple of years, which obviously also had an impact on rewarded ads. So for one, not just, but especially the Google Play Store changed the way it ranked apps in the store. And having failed to mention it, but just to be sure that everybody kind of understands the context here. So a big upside, again, of generating a lot of installs in a very short period of time was that you were able to push your app, be it a game or just a different kind of app, into the rankings of the store, so getting a high amount of visibility in the different Play stores. So if you were to compare it to other kind of marketing activities, being in the top ranking in the app stores would be similar to saying you have one of the top 3 slots above the Google search results and not being on page 5. So nobody clicks to page 5. Subsequently, if you are app number 127 in a particular category on the App Store, chances are very slim that people will just stumble across your game or your app. So the way that the stores changed the way that the ranks were compiled made it more and more difficult for these very short 24-hour or even less bursts to push an app into the ranking. Very difficult. A lot of qualitative components were added to rankings, such as ratings or even the reviews that were placed. So the original idea of simply saying here are 100,000 installs, you are now #1 in the US App Store, kind of made it very difficult for the original idea, and also as a result for fraudsters simulating installs to make this a successful practice. And on another side, people were starting to question, well, what is actually happening with these installs? Since a lot of brand advertisers used to be interested in positioning their apps in app stores, a large role in identifying how these fraudulent or bot installs were actually generated came from the input of agencies that spend more and more time saying, well, we're spending a lot of money, but we are getting installs, but we're not really getting any users here. And of course, it still satisfied the original intent of gaining a lot of installs, but the user base of the application itself was unchanged. So what has changed? What have we seen over the last couple of years that has changed the way we look at, again, we're not really talking about incentivized installs anymore, but we're talking about rewarded ads. So burst campaigns are nowadays no longer only used to drive installs. Install is a mean, CPI is a mean, but no app publisher, be it a game or an app, will ever say, we are doing an amazing job because we have installs, if you don't have any users doing anything in your app or using your product afterwards. So like we saw in the development of normal non-incentivized campaigns, we've seen a very strong focus on post-install metrics, KPIs on rewarded ads, just as well as on non-incentivized. We've seen Apple taking step, but also Google, who is pushing more and more towards trying to address the topic of having, let's call it, artificial installs changing or falsifying the rankings in the app stores. Google is looking into more and more qualitative measures, looking at longer time periods that build the foundation on how they rank apps in the stores. It must be mentioned that the number of installs generated is still one of the key indicators here that plays a very important role, but it is not or no longer exclusively the only thing that is considered when we look at how the rankings are compiled. And of course, on the other side, we've also seen that advertisers have realized and come to the conclusion that simply because something is rewarded or incentivized, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's fraudulent or it's bad at it or that it's low quality, but it's simply necessary to start looking into KPIs and defining KPIs and metrics that are relevant for them in order to evaluate whether an install is actually beneficial and profitable for them or not. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if the app was installed on a device because of an anticipated reward or because of genuine interest. as long as the monetization of that user as a second step takes place. Lastly, what we've seen on our end here at Uplift is we've realized that the CPI, again, is a means. So what we try to do and what works really well is to say, we don't want to generate incentivized installs, but we want to acquire users via rewarded channels where an advertiser will only actually pay if a certain action is taken post-install. One of the reasons why that works very well, if we play it through, you as a user don't know what the advertiser is paying for. So if you see an ad, could be a rewarded video, it could be something on an offer wall, it could be just any kind of rewarded advertising unit that you see in a game. If you click and download and install an application, you could still be a monetizing user. It doesn't mean that you have absolutely no interest. It maybe means you didn't install the app for the right reasons or initially for the right reasons. But if Uplift only charges an advertiser once that user actually makes their first in-app purchase, the intention of the install or why the install took place becomes of secondary importance. So again, moving away to a more risk-less environment for the advertiser when they do rewarded campaigns. So in that context, where does rewarded, or when can rewarded actually play a role and be of interest to you as an advertiser? At Uplift, we try to classify, or we segment the lifetime of an app into 3 different phases, which are namely the launch phase, the grow phase, and the retain phase. And thus far, we've seen the biggest impact and the biggest impact of rewarded in the launch and the grow phases respectively. So of course, while no longer the only intention behind doing rewarded ads, racking up a good amount of install very early in the lifespan of an app helps it gain traction. You can have the best game, the best app in the world. If nobody knows about it, it will die in pain. So the more people know about it, the more people are likely to pass on, give recommendations about it, install it, use it, recommend it to somebody else. So the bigger your base is, the more beneficial it is. So we're talking about short-term visibility here. Every time somebody tells somebody else, shares it on Facebook or all the multiple channels of actually giving feedback, you get somebody else that you don't have to acquire that will actually start using your product as well. It could be that you're looking onto a friend's screen while you're talking. It could be that you're looking over a stranger's shoulder while you're on the subway. You see an app that you like. That, in a way, that is an organic user that you were able to generate simply because somebody else has your app on their phone and is engaging with it. So at the end of the day, you're not only paying for those users that you are generating in direct ways with rewarded campaigns, but you're also getting the uplift of all the organic users that you are able to generate. So the ultimate goal is obviously to have a positive return on ad spend. While that, again, used to be one of the main use cases for doing these kind of the kind of rewarded incentivized activities in its original inception, advertisers have also seen that, and this is very strongly linked to the performance component, it's not only about volume, because if you can define KPIs, qualitative KPIs for rewarded installs, then you can run these on an ongoing basis. They don't have to be a short-term burst with a lot of installs. You can maximize and optimize your traffic sources just as much on incentivized traffic or rewarded traffic as you would on non-incentivized. So you still have the visibility component in there because the overall volume will be higher, but you can sustainably grow not just your install, but also your user base. Again, it's very closely linked to knowing what ROI, what return on ad spend you are looking for when you are looking into rewarded channels. So when we considered the topic of re-engaging with rewarded ads here at Uplift, we tried to figure out what are some of the things, or what can we address to help advertisers and to make sure that rewarded ads are used for the right reasons. So what we did is we built a platform that would allow you to aggregate incentivized or rewarded supply. Instead of having to work with 5 or 6 or 10 different rewarded partners, we allow you to essentially steer and manage your campaign from one interface. Now, the upside of having this possibility is saying, all of a sudden, you don't have to deal with every partner or every network that is running incentivized separately, but you can have a layer on top that will allow you to combat things like fraud across all the different channels that you're running on. If you block a fraudulent source on one partner and you don't block it on another one straight away, chances are that they will continue running via another partner. But if you are able to block or to blacklist a partner on a campaign level, that will obviously decrease the exposure that you will likely have with a fraudulent source. Since everything is based on API, it does allow you to optimize your campaigns in real time, as well as receive real-time reporting. We've also seen that different rewarded or different supply channels yield different results. So instead of saying we have a static CPI for rewarded ads, we want it to be dynamic. We want to really say, what are the sources that work well for you? What placements work well for you? What are the kind of KPIs that we are able to hit? So you actually have the most efficient pricing on your rewarded ads, which is pretty much based on all the information that we've gathered and that our algorithm are able to predict. It's managed, so you don't have to wake up on a Saturday morning at 6 a.m. if you do decide to run a burst campaign to see which of your partners are actually delivering what they promised and which are not. We will gladly take care of that. And last but not least, it allows you to really look into your performance across different publishers. Instead of saying, look at the performance of partner A, partner B, partner C, you can now compare and say, what is my overall LTV? Some partners might work well towards a certain KPI, but they may not be as performant towards another one. That doesn't mean one is bad and the other is better, but it simply means that your emphasis, your focus on where you spend how much per install and what kind of KPIs that you want to focus on need to be adjusted in the right way. So a lot has happened on the rewarded end in the industry over the last couple of years. A lot of complexity has been added. Thankfully, a lot of complexity that also allows us to combat a lot of the fraudulent activity happening in the market. But obviously, Uplift can only do so much with the activity that's run through us. And with that, I think I've come to the end of my short story about the development of rewarded ads in the last couple of years, and want to hand it over to Michael to share with us how we can actually measure all of that. Michael.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning or good evening, wherever you are. Thank you very much, Chris, for that insightful look into rewarded ads and so on. I'm just going to share my screen in a moment, and then we will kick off. Okay, hopefully you can now see what I can see. I shall hide this. There we go. Okay, so first a little bit about myself. My name is Michael. As Fabian introduced me earlier, I am the team lead for the Japan and APAC regions of the Adjust team, and I oversee a lot of different elements of tracking of ads and the sort of business decisions that go on behind them. I'd like to start off with a little bit about why Adjust is what it is and why we provide the solutions that we do. Looking at the industry at the moment, I think some of the key challenges that UA and mobile marketers face revolves around the availability of data, the management of data, and then operating based on the results that you get. So as I've listed up here, the challenges that people in this industry face, one of the main ones is that if you run a wide selection of campaigns, you end up with data over countless dashboards, and each of these dashboards will have their own measurement KPIs and metrics, and it makes it very, very difficult to compare if you're using different rules to decide what is an install, what is a valuable user, what is a retained user, and so on. Also, there are a lot of tools that one would have to use, for example, not only just Excel, but things like to provide deep linking and to be able to provide information to your backend and so on. And finally, if you're trying to make these educated decisions and if you're trying to operate logically based on results, you need to have some sort of solution that will allow you to do this. And fortunately, Adjust is that solution. I cannot move on. There we go. Nope, that's too far. Excuse me. So a little bit about Adjust. We are currently, as it says here, the #1 attribution SDK on iOS platform. We are integrated in just over 22,000 different apps around the world. Within our within our client base are major players like Spotify, eBay, Nintendo, and so on. We have around about 150 employees spread across the globe in offices with our headquarters in Berlin. We also have San Francisco, New York, Tokyo, Seoul, Brazil, France, Turkey, all over the place. In terms of data, we track about 100 billion data points. That's a lot of data. And we're integrated with over 1,000 different networks and DSPs, DMPs, again, across the globe. And we push out about 2 petabytes of monthly traffic. That is a lot. I can't even begin to explain how much that is, but it is a lot. So first off, before we can go into how am I going to analyze my data, I want to talk a little bit about how closely we work with Uplift. Uplift have been great partners of ours for years, and together we've developed what I think is the easiest and simplest integration system in the industry. You can see here on the right-hand side, I've put a lovely screenshot. All you do, you just plug in the API key from Uplift, and you're ready to go. If you want to link your events, so you can maybe do some targeting based around event, users doing events, or if you want to see event per campaign, for example, on the Uplift dashboard, you can link your events. And all relevant data, including reattributions, including anything else you want to send across, is automatically shared with Uplift in real time. And there's absolutely no limitation on how much you can link, how much data you can share, how many events you can send across. In our position on this is any data that we track is your data, and it should be absolutely manipulatable and usable in whichever way you see as appropriate. Also, nobody likes editing tracking URLs. Fortunately, Uplift have been very generous and given us permission to add them to our tracker wizard, which basically generates the URL for you. So the nightmare years of hacking away an Excel sheet at 3 in the morning are well behind us. Okay, so measuring rewarded ads. Now, while it is very important to look at the network as a whole and compare Uplift to your, the total of your users and their events from other networks as well, the great value and the most important thing I believe is to dig down into data and break users down by campaign name or offer name, by affiliate ID, and also by creative as well. And Uplift's default setup that we've set up with them allows you to do this. And I'm going to show you on the next slide some screenshots of this. But I just wanted to show you very quickly what it will look a little bit like. So when you track it, you have your Uplift name will come up on our dashboard, and then under there you'll be able to see per offer, per affiliate, and per creative all of the different KPIs that we offer. So, and of course you can also customize this by editing the URL as well. So what does it look like? Very quickly, this is what our deliverables page will look like. So you can see here, I'm in the ad groups level, which would mean that this is affiliates. So per affiliate within a single campaign, I'm going to see, excuse me, how many impressions and how many clicks and how many installs I got, and also how many reattributions, and then also those conversion rates, number of sessions, amount of revenue, and then unfortunately I ran out of space. Excuse me. I ran out of space, but also daily, weekly, and monthly active users, and also any number of events that you have set up in your app. This could be tutorial cleared, it could be purchase, it could be invite a friend. You can see per ad group, per affiliate, or per creative, or per campaign, how many times this event was triggered in a certain time frame. Again, this is going to be a theme, I think, for today's speech. There is no limitation on the amount of data that you can send. If you want to track 500 events with us and they all get triggered 10 million times, then please go ahead and do it. Our servers can take it, I promise. You can also get this drawn up as a beautiful graph. I do know that publishers love colors. Here is 10 colors. At the moment, I'm looking at the number of conversions over time here, and then these numbers along the top are of the first day that I've highlighted there, and you can sort of see over time how different campaigns are tracking. You can also use all of our available KPIs with this graphing tool. At the moment, I'm looking at number of installs per day, but I could look at revenue per day, I could look at sessions per day, and so on as well. So even here, you're able to see both how many users have I driven per campaign or per creative, but also, are these valuable users? And then the other side of analyzing if a campaign is giving you quality users is to use cohort analysis. What this does is we look at basically after the install, what are these users doing? Are they coming back to the app? Are they triggering the events that I care about? Are they actually are they interacting with my app in a way that I care about? And anywhere in the world, you can look at retention rate. I've put retained number of users here. One of the great key features that we offer is cohorts based around events. So let's say I have a registration event in my app, and I want every user who comes in as the first step in the user funnel to trigger this event and register their username. I can look at what percentage of users from a campaign or from a creative per day after install have triggered this event. And by combining the deliverables, the overall results of a campaign, and cohort analysis, you can really answer the question of where are my users coming from and where are my valuable users coming from. And I think a very common misconception, and as Chris said back in the day, all people looked at was installs, big numbers, beautiful charts, very happy agencies. But these days, we do see more focus and more attention being paid to, are these users quality users? Because it's fantastic to get 100,000 installs, but it's not great if 3% of them travel down your user funnel and become valuable users. These cohorts are entirely dynamic. They can work with any event that you put in. You can change them at any time. They're also in real time, which means if you are looking at burst campaigns, if you're looking at targeting users in certain, maybe an hour of a day, you will immediately be able to see on our dashboard, am I getting users? And then the next day, you'll be able to say, okay, of those users, how many of them have come back? How many of them can I still expect to see in the app the next day, and so on. Finally, Adjust is more than just an attribution tool. We also offer a whole wide range, an ever-growing range of functionality to further take the data and take the results that you have and use it to improve your UA, improve the app itself as well. I've listed up 3 of them here. The first one, we offer dynamic callbacks. We can take all of the user data, not only device IDs, not only campaign information, but also things like location, city, IP address, iOS version, all these different things. And we can send them through to a BI tool or AWS-like storage solution for you guys to then completely customize your KPIs and make reports until the end of time. Another great functionality linked to callbacks is our callback parameter functionality. What we allow you to do is send your own IDs, like user ID, username, email address, to us, and we will then pair those users with any of the callback functionality. So that includes name of the creative they came in on, and then we'll send it back to you to your backend. So what this means is you could run a campaign for a month on a particular, let's say a particular product that you're selling, a particular, like a pair of shoes. You could then, in real time in your backend, get a list of user IDs of users who like shoes. And then when it comes time to go into that third stage and start reattributing your users and bringing back the lapsed users, you can just pull up a list of people who like shoes and boom, you can target those guys, or you can maybe do a push notification and so on. Are we okay? I think we're okay. We can also use Adjust Audience Builder. This is a relatively new function that we added recently. Our Audience Builder allows you to create segments and separate them into groups if you want, for the purposes of A/B testing, retargeting, and also comparing. You could maybe split the group in two and give them to different networks, or you can split them into 10 and run them with 10 different creatives and sort of make a decision on, you know, how to split up users for that purpose. This, again, feeds back into the concept of using the results that you have to make more educated marketing decisions. If you do an A/B test and obviously maybe you get more results on network A, but you get much more high quality users on network B, then you can make marketing decisions that will lead to the acquisition of more quality users and so on. Finally, our dashboard is entirely in real time, and we have an infinite look back window, which means no matter what happens, no matter how long a user disappears for, if they come back, we will accurately link them back to their original install, track them correctly, and make sure that throughout the entirety of your app's lifespan, no matter how long it may be, you will be able to make marketing decisions that takes into account both the data from yesterday and the data from 2, 3, 4 or more years ago. And that is it from me. Thank you very much for listening. I'm gonna, I think, throw back over to Fabian now. Hopefully he'll jump in and take over.
That's right. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Michael. That was perfect. You can just leave the last slide if you were so kind. Perfect. So what I wanted to do now with you guys was go through a couple of questions that we have received from the audience, both about Chris's part of the presentation as well as Michael's. So I wanted to take about 5 minutes to go through the questions that you guys had, and please feel free, if you have more questions, we'll take them as they come. So the first question I had was regarding Chris's part of the presentation, so about kind of the evolution of rewarded ads and how in many ways they can be beneficial to your guys' UA activities. And the question that rose, Chris, was what about pricing? So looking at rewarded ads and rewarded installs, what is kind of the ratio we see between non-incent to incent? Maybe you can share a few experiences there.
Thanks, Fabian. I'll answer with my favorite answer around all these kind of questions related to app marketing. It always depends, right? It will depend on which category that you're in, what kind of geo you're targeting, how high the level of competition is in those respective combinations of industry or genre or industry, in combination with the geo. On average, what we say, it can be that you can expect to pay 50% for a rewarded install as you do for a non-incentivized install, but it can also be the case that you pay 1/10 of that. I think it's, as an average, you can say, or you can go, if you start off by saying roughly 1/3 of your non-incentivized CPI should be a good starting point for a rewarded CPI.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Chris. If there's any more questions, just let me know in the question panel, and yeah, we can basically take them as they come. The next question I had was sort of for both our speakers, so for Michael and Chris. Maybe Chris, however, can start. So it was regarding the topic of fraud that Chris already mentioned. So kind of looking at fraudulent installs and the prevention of those. What are kind of some of the KPIs that you're seeing that are important in order to block fraud, and what are kind of the initiatives that you guys at Uplift are taking? And then maybe Michael, you can add on to that.
Sure. So unsurprisingly, we see as much fraud or possibly even more fraud in the rewarded space as we do in the non-incentivized space. But as we're still talking very much about app marketing, it's still very much the same, or most of the time it's very much the same or a similar kind of fraud. So the way we address this topic internally is I don't think we have petabytes of data that we look at just yet, but we do look at a lot of the data that we get in from campaigns and analyze it against patterns. So normally normal user behavior has a very identifiable pattern to it. There are certain expectations that we associate with a normal user. Of course, you have outliers, but you have those, just like people are different, their behavior is different. Whereas normally, fraudulent activity will have a very different pattern. So some of the things that we look at when we identify fraud is, obviously we do look at click to install times, we look at IPs, we look at daytime parting. So we have a certain curve of when we expect users to generate, or partners to generate the most amount of installs. If that goes against the grain, so if we see that a campaign that's run in the US generates the most amount of installs between 2 and 4 a.m., chances are quite high that that is not very legitimate activity, because most of the people are asleep at that time. It gives us indications of what is suspicious of fraud. I think that's very important to emphasize. So we spend a lot of time internally and have a lot of resources dedicated on verifying that what looks suspicious to be fraudulent is actually proven as such to an extent where we feel confident enough that it is before we completely block it. But it's really about trying to understand what is reasonable, what is not. The challenge that we obviously face in that context is we can only evaluate the traffic and the media sources and the users that we see that are coming through Uplift system. But overall speaking, it is very much a similar kind of approach, without sharing everything that we look into, as we have in a non-incentivized space.
Thanks, Chris. Michael, can you maybe also share a few of your experiences in terms of kind of adjust fight against fraud in the space?
Absolutely. I think Chris's answer is pretty much on the nail. It is about looking for patterns of behavior that aren't human. And what we do at Adjust, we have what's called our fraud suite, which prevents against click-based and also install-based fraud. So we'll be looking at things like Chris said about click to install time, the ratio of those to make sure we're spotting people who are spamming us with clicks to try and get in, but just before the install. Also, we have a list of IP addresses that we know do not belong to real users, things like Tor exit nodes or cloud services that these sort of phone farms will use to just emulate installs over and over and over again as well. In terms of the approach, though, and I think this is something that people are coming to terms with, it's not really going to work if only one party is involved. It does take very much a conscious effort from the tracking tool like Adjust, from the network like Uplift, and also from the client, which is you guys. One of the sort of ways that we do this is we have our callback system, which lets us send data anywhere in real time. We also offer fraud callbacks to networks. So what this allows us to do is, if something goes wrong and we're seeing hundreds and hundreds of installs coming in 5 seconds after the click, we will begin to alert, let's say, Uplift in real time, and it will allow them, and we'll give them everything: the device IDs, the campaign information, the IP addresses, anything we can get that we can send through, so that they can take the action. They have all the information they need to take decisive action and block, let's say, one app, that's doing this, or whatever it may be. Uplift, as well as a handful of networks from around the world, have been very much forerunners in this integration and have worked with us on a number of cases. And certainly in the cases that I've been involved in, as soon as the network is in sync with us, which invariably happens, it's actually quite easy to crack fraud. Now, it may be that one or two get through, but from a fraudster's perspective, you have to win in bulk. If you're only getting 5 fraudulent installs through, the whatever it may be, CPC or CPI you get from that is not going to pay for the costs of producing fraud. Fraud only works if there's a profit, and there's only a profit if it's a large or medium or large scale operation. And by using this and by sharing the correct information at the correct time, we believe we can simply make fraud unprofitable. And if it's not profitable, it won't happen. And that's about it, yeah. In terms of the methodology, it is quite similar to what Chris said, but I am going to have to let you guys down. I can't give you all of the details, just in case one of you is a tricky fraudster.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for sharing your insights on that one. Yeah, I think with that being said, and the topic of fraud taking also a prominent place here, I would like to call it a day and wanted to thank, first of all, Uplift for being part of this webinar and contributing and sharing some of your great insights on basically how you help people trying to do rewarded ads. And if you have questions, of course, we'll share the slides, we'll share the video as well, and obviously also Chris's contact details in case you have more questions or would like to get in touch. Michael, it's the same with him. I'll first of all wanted to thank you for your insights on how to track, measure, and improve the effectiveness of rewarded ads with Adjust's suite, and also for your detailed feedback on the fraud topic. That being said, we at Adjust do at least one webinar per month, ranging from topics such as you've just witnessed, rewarded ads, video ads, talking about fraud, talking about retargeting, re-engagement, or retention. So there's basically a broad range of topics that we cover. So make sure to visit our webinars page to always stay on top of all the latest webinars that we're doing. Yeah, that's it. We got a few questions that we weren't able to answer due to time restrictions. Sorry about that, guys, but we'll make sure that we pass those on to the people in question, and then they'll make sure to send you an answer via email, I promise. Thanks again for those in Europe. Have a good lunch, and see you guys next time. Thanks again, Chris. Thanks again, Michael.